in a trilogy of films. It's 23 minutes long, after which Hetain and I are going to have a conversation which will go on for around 15 to 20 minutes more. We hope you'll stick around for that. I think without further ado, it's best if we screen Trinity. So this is 2021 Trinity by Hetain Patel. Thank you.
मैं पहली વાર ગામમાંથી જાણ્યું હતું બા પાસે એમણે મને કહ્યું હતું કે આપણા પૂર્વજોના આત્માઓ સ્ત્રીઓના શરીરમાં સૂઈને રહે છે. જ્યારે હું બધું છોડીને આવી ઘણું બધું ખોવાઈ ગયું. જો તો વધારે મનોરંજન હોત તો અત્યાર સુધીમાં આપણે લગ્નોનો મેચ કરી દીધો હોત. તું હાથી જેવી છે, પાછી કર. રોશન એના ઘરે વિઝિટ કરવા આવ્યો છે. એ હવે જીપી ડોક્ટર બની ગયો છે. એ આવવાનો છે કાલે ચાય નાસ્તો કરવા એના મા બાપુજી જોડે.
What time?
3 વાગે. કેમ, તને શું થયું? આના માટે તો તને તાલીમ આપું છું.
What? To drink chai?
મીના, જ્યારે તમે લગ્ન કરો અને લડાઈ સિરમ હોય, જ્યારે લડત પૂર્વજોને જાગૃત કરે ત્યારે એ તું પૂર્ણ થશે. યુ વિલ બી કમ્પ્લીટ.
Complete. So what am I now then?
તું તાલીમમાં છે, રાહ જોએ છે, પણ આપણે વધારે વાર રાહ ના જોઈ શકીએ. મીના, તું આખી રાત ક્યાં જાય છે? તું આમ કરવાનું ચાલુ નહીં રાખી શકે. મને ખબર છે તારે પાસે કોઈ ફ્રેન્ડ્સ નથી. તે ખતરનાક છે. રોશન અને તેના માતા પિતા હમણાં અહીંયા આવશે. મીના, આપણે આની જ રાહ જોતા હતા. આપણે ફોન નથી કર્યો. જલ્દી કરને તૈયાર થઈ જા.
I'm so sorry. That is so cool. Hey! What's your problem? I'm so sorry. મને માફ કરજો.
તે મને અપમાનિત કરી. ચાલુ રાખ.
Why didn't you tell me about this before?
મારી લડાઈ સિરમ. મારા લગ્ન. ખરાબ મેચ હતો. It's okay.
Hello? Hello? Excuse me? I just wanted to know how much to... How much to change the colour of my bike? Yeah, that bike. Yes, that one. I don't want to buy a new bike. I don't want to buy a new bike. How much to change the colour of this bike? Like this. You collect these too?
એ મને કહ્યું હતું, લડાઈ સિરમ જે આપણા પૂર્વજોને જગાડે છે, એ પ્રાચીન ખોવાયેલી ભાષા કે જે એક સમય માનવતાને સંયુક્ત કર્યા હતા.
Satyo Mahiti Prabhu Paramasate Tulaija Nandhariti Prabhu Paramate Tulaija Mahamrityu Mahiti Amrita Samipe Natalaija Tuhino Chuto Tujhe Darshana Danalaija Tuhino Chuto Tujhe Bhajanana Danalaija Asatyo Mahiti Prabhu Paramasate Tulaija Nandhariti Prabhu Paramate Tulaija
જ્યારે એ ભાષા પાછી મળશે ત્યારે એ ફેલાશે અને નવી દુનિયાની શરૂઆતનું પ્રારંભ કરશે.
Great, Hetain. So thank you everyone for sticking around. We're just going to do a little changeover now to projecting some images from something of the spread of Heitain's practice over the years, both behind the scenes shots as well as some stills. So we're going to let that just play as we speak. And we might refer to some of the images as we go along. But Hetain, I'd love to just start by asking you how it is to be watching your own films in different contexts with different audiences. This is probably the first time that you've watched the film being screened in India, in Delhi. Of course, we have shown the work before in Bombay. I'm always amazed by how absorbed audiences are in your works. How is it for you as a viewer, sitting and watching audiences enjoy your work?
always nervy. Don't know what people will think whilst watching it. It's very different, like in the scenario like here, where people are sat more like a cinema, as opposed to say a gallery scenario. You know, as we know in a gallery for video works, people kind of vote with their feet, and you know, how often do you sometimes poke your head into an installation and go, nah, and just kind of carry on, right? So I enjoy sort of watching that, and so here it's like it's a little bit, you know, I'm stood at the back. If I could have got away with like secretly sitting there and watching people's faces, that'd be different. But it's kind of like, as long as no one gets up and leaves, that's a good sign. And you know, it's kind of, it's difficult to sort of get a sense until you speak to people after, really.
And I suppose because your works are screened in so many different platforms, in other words, in this kind of auditorium space, but also the gallery space, so the engagement is so different. Does that play a part when it comes to actually making the work, where I think I've heard you say somewhere before that you enjoy making work that requires multiple viewings, which perhaps supposes a gallery kind of context where you're popping in and popping out maybe on more than one occasion to see your work.
Yeah, it's not that I want require it for people to see it more than once. I think when I make a work, especially one like this, I come from the assumption that nobody knows who I am, or that they've seen none of my previous works before, or they don't care who I am. That I have to come from that base point so that I can be clear that the work communicates without needing some previous keys to understand it. However, there's lots of things in the work that I put in that if you do know my work and my practice, then you'll be sort of, I guess, you'll see other things in there, and that whether you fall into either of those scenarios, I like to think that on multiple viewings you'd see different things in there. So, you know, I try not to simplify anything. You know, I think we don't give audiences enough credit in a lot of situations, especially in big scale cinema, when things are obviously spelt out a lot. So I try to put enough in there that you can figure stuff out yourself. Yeah.
I mean, from this, as I said at the beginning before the screening, this is the third part in a trilogy of films. But perhaps the most narrative, or the most overt narrative, exists in this third part, Trinity. And of course, also in a sense, it functions as the most cinematic. So perhaps, can you just talk to this idea of the cinematic? Why is that important to you? Where has it, from what kind of earlier works, or would you like to point to some earlier works which kind of include the DNA of where we get to now in Trinity, and also perhaps an indicator of where you're going, where this kind of cinematic attitude towards filmmaking will lead in the future?
Yeah, I mean, for many years, even though I've been film obsessed for all my life, I never considered the possibility of making anything cinematic. You know, I never really thought that's something I can do. And so making the jump, which was a previous work of my sort of slow motion jumping in a Spider-Man suit, the only reason that became cinematic in a way is because I wanted something really slow motion, and that was impossible without a specific camera. And then sort of like its little wormhole, you need that camera, you need this crew, you need this thing, you need this funding, blah, blah, blah. So then that sort of opened up a wormhole. And when I saw that piece for the first time, I was like wowed by it. You know, like I'm so used to shooting things myself and knowing nothing about film, self-taught. You know, stick a camera on a tripod, film myself doing something, a quick basic edit, and that's it. And so this time, seeing the possibilities of what's possible with equipment and crew and directing in a different way, it sort of really blew my mind. And so that's what started the journey to the next film, Don't Look at the Finger, the Afro Kung Fu sign language film. And things just grew from there, really. And then in terms of the sort of more narrative part of this, if you like, for a little while I've been wanting to make a feature film, my first feature film. And I'm sort of aware, you know, everything I've been doing so far is in the art world, looking for funding, presenting, the critique, but to make a feature film is going to cost a lot more money, and so I'll be needing to go through film streams, if you like. But all worlds are difficult to get into anyway. But with film, you kind of need to prove yourself, and so I heard that people enjoyed Don't Look at the Finger, but they were like, yeah, but can he work with actors? Or, can he do dialogue? Or what's he going to do if we let him loose on blah-de-blah? So with Trinity, I wanted to have a go and to try this sort of narrative feel. And in any way, the feature film that I want to make is not a rarefied thing that is abstract or whatnot. It's something that I want it to feel at place in a multiplex cinema. I'm interested in that space as a place that we as society deem as important, and that usually only the important figures get up on there. And in the Western context in which I grew up, that's Hollywood, that's Marvel, and it's kind of white people on screen, more or less, if I can say that. But so I wanted to kind of inject. It's partly about representation, and so when I made Don't Look at the Finger, before it was an all-black cast. It was before we had Black Panther, and so I was creating something that I wanted to see on screen that we didn't have. And so now, thankfully, we're in a place where we have lots of amazing, complex black cinema that we can enjoy, but we still don't have South Asian faces in the Western context film like Hollywood in any sort of expansive way. We're still stereotyped. We're still kebab shop people, taxi drivers, or which is real, but we don't get anything else. Yeah. So the idea of Trinity and the feature film that I want to make is to be part of that expansion, I guess.
Yeah. And I suppose, could we talk maybe a little bit about identity, and especially, both of us as diaspora people, British, South Asian. Can you maybe talk a little bit about your own relationship to your diasporic roots, how it has informed some of the practice? I think those of us who know your work can see it right through your practice. Those perhaps who don't, maybe we could pinpoint some of the works which are scrolling behind us. Firstly, about your diasporic roots. Secondly, perhaps the use of your own family often, who play a part. Here we go with Mamai behind us, who actually play a part in the works themselves. Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, the work's very autobiographical. Mina, the character, is kind of me in a lot of senses. And perhaps it's a very typical diasporic story, the setup, if you like. Being fed a version of a heritage that feels dislocated, and so you go along with it out of respect and that you want to be part of it, but you're also frustrated by it and you rebel against it. And that goes for cultural practice of prayer, ritual, whatever it might be, and it also goes in this case in terms of expectation of marriage, all stuff that I've lived through. But I just sort of replaced a couple of things. So, replacing certain cultural practices with martial arts, and that sort of thing. Which
we've seen often in previous works, the introduction of martial arts.
Yeah, I'm a very physical person in a way. I don't. Maybe it comes from not having any physical training to funnel that into. So copying dance off the TV, Bruce Lee and Michael Jackson and that sort of thing, to loving dance and wishing I could do it better.
And indeed, those of us who saw Heitain's performance yesterday would have seen elements in your own kind of performative practice where dance, martial arts play their part.
Yeah, totally. I think I understand the world quite physically, or I think physically, despite whatever medium my work comes out as. And so, I'm really interested in the communicative possibilities of the body, whether we choose to acknowledge it for ourselves or not. Like, our bodies speak without us choosing that in a way. So what happens if we can access that? So I guess in some ways it's about wanting to access your own body,
Yeah.
right? Like wanting to have agency over what it's doing, what it's saying. And again, that comes from a very British context, I think, for me, in the sense that when I was growing up in an all-white town, you know, a lot of assumptions were made about me based purely off what I look like before I could say a single word. And it felt like that agency, that control over what I'm projecting or what I am is taken away from me. And so you sort of realize the immense power or, you know, of the body, what it's doing. So it's like, I guess that gave me a real desire to want to take control of that.
Yeah.
Whether that's like wanting to be Bruce Lee and kick everyone's ass, or be able to moonwalk and look cool, or like in my practice, like try and find ways for it to feel like a place to express something real.
Yeah. And would I be right in saying that in addition to using the body in that fashion, one other technique you've used both in your practice and perhaps in earlier life growing up as a South Asian in the UK is the technique of humour, and the way humour plays out often, maybe less in Trinity, but certainly in earlier works. I've always found myself very drawn to that aspect in your practice, that it's able to deflect, but also it's quite empowering the way that you use humour. You sort of, you allow yourself to be the subject of humour, and yet you're then able to manipulate it for your own ends.
The humour aspect is really like allowing my personality into it. You know, anytime it wasn't in there, it was because I was denying it. You know, like I was scared that I wouldn't be taken seriously as an artist, and I'm still not taken seriously by some people. You know, so but it's one of those things that you just have to put in. Otherwise, what's the point in having an art practice if you're lying to yourself? And then secondly, it was I guess it's kind of a mechanism when the stuff I wanted to talk about is identity or things that would be considered turn you into the labeled as the angry Asian guy if you're talking about racism and stuff in the West. It felt like humor was a way to get people to drop their guards and to be open to what was being discussed, if you like. And then now with Trinity is an example of a new addition, a new tone in my work, which is anger, actually. And so that has grown into the work, and that partly comes from, I guess, a growing confidence in myself as a maker, but also since Black Lives Matter happened, I feel like people are more open to it, or you can express a wider gamut of emotions that might include anger and those sort of things without you being shut down and kind of, you know, a wall going up.
Yeah. I want to pivot just to the element of your art making practice, which speaks obviously to these large scale ambitious projects, and perhaps I would like you to address those in the audience who are younger artists who are coming up in the scene and who might aspire to make works on this kind of scale in the future. I know in our context in India, it's very hard often for artists to have access to the tools with which it's possible to work at this kind of scale. So Hetain, maybe can you give some pointers to younger artists about how maybe they can address some of these kinds of larger scale works, but on a kind of working their way to it rather than necessarily jumping straight to that point?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about not waiting till the big funding. Never wait to the big funding, the big opportunity. You know, we call it an art practice. You've got to practice. And so, like, I feel like there's lots of DIY ways to build up to this sort of thing. So, I mean, to give you an idea, since 2015, when I've been making these big films, you know, it's been 7 years, I've spent a total of 10 days on set. You know, just 10 days. You know, so because it costs so much money. And so, like, that's not a place to save your creative energy for, sort of thing. You wouldn't have a practice. The way that I approached it, in a way, is sort of shooting it myself on the phone, actually, before I get to the filming day. So, you know, with the dancers, I work with them to kind of create the choreography. and shoot all of the angles on my phone and just edit it myself on the laptop. So I to sort of build the idea of what the film is, and so the film's ready to go really before we get anywhere near a film set, because I'm so panicked about getting it done on the day. And so I think that's something you can do. And actually, even if you didn't have the film set day that requires all the money, the film that you shoot even on your phone with the angles, with the movement, with the intention in the performance is still a great film. I still really like my DIY version of the ones before this. And then, sometimes labor is an issue, but I think if you're starting out, the likelihood is you probably know people in different art forms. Dancers, musicians. And what I definitely used to do is labor exchange. So, I work with some dancers who might give me their time for a weekend or a week, and in return I give them my time to make a video for them for something they're doing. And I think the most important thing is just making, like just doing and making it. I feel like there's no better way to learn. I'm constantly like thirsting for more time on set. But in the absence of that, I feel like there's lots of ways that we can find to at least practice the essence of what that is in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, I know that we're short on time. I would like to open it up now to questions from the audience, if there are any, in response to Hitain's wonderful work. I also have a raft of questions myself, which I can carry on asking. I think we probably have about five minutes more. So do we have any questions from the audience at this point? Or are we all still digesting the film? I mean, one thing which strikes me, Hetain, from Trinity is your use of the mythic and the religious, and obviously this is now playing to a knowledgeable audience in India, perhaps in a way that may not be the case in screenings in the UK. So could you maybe just talk to us? But actually, do you have a question?
Hi, Mort. Hi, Hetain. So I think I just want to, I actually have two questions, but we only have 5 minutes, and I hope I don't spend that 5 minutes asking the question. So very quickly, you spoke about representation earlier and anger just a minute ago. I'm just curious to know how you particularly tap into this idea of the superhero or superpowers, or, you spoke about martial arts and choreography and your performance from yesterday. How do you think that becomes a way for you to address that very kind of critical question of representation and identity?
Yeah, that's a much better question than mine anyway, so please go ahead.
So, we imbibe and we take on so much information, right, subconsciously. Like, if you think of my niece and nephews who, if they want to dress up as a superhero, which they do all the time, they've not got many choices. And without realizing it, they have to either change ethnicity or change gender in order to imagine themselves as heroic or powerful. And, we internalize these things, and it's so damaging. And so I think different kind of representation in those figures that are heroic or that have power or that have agency is really important, that we kind of have those sort of different identities that we can kind of aspire to, particularly as kids, but also to see ourselves as adults in that role, I feel like. So that's kind of part of the premise of that, I think.
Thank you for that.
Can I ask a second one?
Sure.
Well, I feel like there's, being familiar with your practice to some extent, I also feel like you are, through your practice, trying to address some sort of a question of loss. For example, in your performance yesterday, one of the key ideas was loss of language or culture, or as we kind of go along in that diasporic context, right? And here as well, we kind of, we hear the mum sort of talk about this ancient language that can, or rather this kind of this specific language that can awaken our ancestors, right? And then, you know, I guess my question is, you know, how do you use your practice to, and why is this theme, the idea of loss, you know, of culture, language, or, you know, people, or whatever else it is, why is that important?
I would say for all my childhood until my adult years, you know, growing up in the scenario that I've described, you know, just in the only brown family in town sort of thing, I think what that does to you, that racism, is it makes you ashamed of anything that is not white British in your life. So all of the Indian aspects of your life makes you ashamed of that deeply. And it was only in my adult years and now through my art practice that I'm able to that's different now. And you know, I realize in retrospect that culturally my heritage was robbed from me in a way. You know, like I feel like that was taken away from me through the context that I was living in, and now I want that back. You know, I want that back, and I'm taking it back. So like I feel like part of my practice is to you know, delve into some of those things in a way that that feels right to me somehow. I don't know quite to explain it, but it's not as simple as, say, you know, going back and engaging in the rituals or rites or the prayer ceremonies or whatever it is, but it's through investigating them somehow and trying to find a place that they can sit in my body, in my memory, in my reality, and feel like they fit. I want them to fit, you know, and so I think this feeling of loss in a way is partly acknowledging a loss that of some sort that I'm trying to claw back at in a way.
Yeah, that strikes home. That really does. Hetain, thank you so much. I'd also like to thank the British Council, who of course brought you over here, and the India Art Fair, and to all of you for coming. And we hope you enjoy your evening. Hetain, thanks.
Thanks so much.